started, so.
All right, you did. Hey everyone, thanks for coming out. I'm Adam. I'm one of the organizers here at Columbus Web Group with Kevin. We're going to do a talk here today about animation and interaction design. A little bit about the group. A lot of new faces here. So we're just a local group who tries to talk about a wide range of topics, anything from iOS to responsive design, anything in between. So we try to meet up about once a month and do these talks, usually about a half-an-hour talk, and then some socializing, hanging out, just sharing some ideas. So.
Yeah, so we asked, well, I think Ryan actually reached out to us, so we're always looking for more and more presenters. So if you have an idea for a topic, you can email or contact Adam and myself through our meetup on meetup.com, and we'll even help you develop your content, put together your outline and your whole agenda. But Ryan just reached out to us and said that he had an awesome presentation, and I believed him. And so this is a kind of a more rare one where I don't even know like the details of his presentation, but I'm going to trust that it's going to be
Very
good.
trusting.
Yeah, I've seen Ryan do a couple presentations. He's a really great presenter. He works at Dynamit, and you'll probably do another introduction yourself, but he works at Dynamit. He leads their mobile development, so iOS, Android. You also fly planes too, or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. Ryan's really awesome. He's a great developer. So, with that, right.
Cool.
Cool. So, to preface, this is not a me talk to you guys presentation. This is very conversational. I am also doing. This is kind of a dry run of this presentation. I'll be giving this presentation in Denver, Colorado in about a month for a conference called 360 iDev, which is kind of an international iOS developer conference. I figured it would be fun to kind of do a first run of this presentation here in Columbus, and I know this is more of a web group, so I've kind of generalized this a little bit more. So we're going to kind of focus on some of the more abstract stuff around animations and interaction design. So it's not, I'm not going to be splashing Objective-C or Swift up here. But I think there's one slide that has it. It's not that big of a deal. We won't go through it. But we're going to get into more theory about introducing animations and interactions in software. So who am I? A little bit of background on me. Like Kevin said, I work at Dynamit. That's a digital agency right across the street, nationwide. We do mobile apps, we do websites, web apps, .NET, PHP, full stack stuff, design, UX, you name it, we probably do it. I am our lead mobile developer. I'm also a solutions architect there, so I'm helping build systems, I'm helping design apps, I'm helping jump into Objective-C code and build stuff. So kind of all across the board over there. Some of the stuff that I do and why I'm in front of you speaking about animation design. So I do a lot of open source work. This is my favorite project that I've ever done. It's very, very simple, but it's kind of a little sidebar control that you would drop into apps. This has been used in a couple hundred apps, which I think is amazing, including some ones that are doing really well on the App Store. So I think it's pretty sweet. I've got a lot of compliments. And this all came out of a GIF I saw on Dribble, and I thought, cool, I'll recreate it. Jumped into code, built it, open sourced it. I've done this a bunch of times. This is another one. I love getting into the nitty-gritty detail. You can see these shadows are kind of all different. They're dynamic. They actually move. They're physics-based. It's fun. This is the stuff I geek out about. This is the stuff I love. And this happened a couple months ago. Well, 6 months ago. Does anybody know what this is? Facebook Paper. Does anybody still use it? 1, 2, 3. Yes! So I deleted the Facebook app. I'm not a big Facebook user, but I deleted the Facebook app because this is awesome. So what is Paper? It is another version of the Facebook app, but it has the most amazing interactions and animations in a mobile application that you will ever find. There are a couple games out there that do some really amazing stuff, like Monument Valley. But when it comes to an app that you just use every day that has some form of utility, this app is amazing. And I'm just kind of walking through some of the different animations and controls that they've built into this thing. Most of this stuff is open source, not the app. They're not going to open source Facebook app, but the animation library they used on this. I'm not going to dig too much into that, but if you're interested, it's a library called Facebook Pop. I've also done a tech talk with a group called Ray Wenderlich. We do iOS tutorials. I help write with them. But we had the engineers that built this on a tech talk, and they kind of walked through why this exists, the problem it solves, and how they did it. It's really, really cool. It's just another kind of subtle animation. I mean, you can notice like the glint on this. It's awesome. And one last one, just a modal. Subtle bounces, you can drag it up. It's sweet. So, what are animations? It's a super abstract question. And I'm actually like asking a question. Like I'm curious to hear when you guys hear animations, what do you think?
The transition between point A versus point B.
Cool. That's that's like the literal definition of an animation. Anybody else?
I think of being vibrant.
Okay. Can you expand on that? What do you mean by vibrant?
Like to animate, if it's personified, would be like prismatic or vibrant. So
Awesome. Yeah. So when I'm thinking animation, literally, yes, it's a transition from A to B over time T. And you can interoperate between those times and figure out your position based on some timing function. That's a super technical definition of what an animation is. But what we're talking about is more that abstract high-level definition, bringing life, emotion, and attention to something. Because remember, when we're talking about animation, we're not talking about taking a video of a real person and animating that video, because that person's alive, that person's moving, there's movement in that video. What we're doing is we're taking an inanimate, not alive object, and we're making it do something. We're making it move unnaturally. And we're doing that because we want to make it seem alive. We want to make whoever's watching that animation feel emotion and feel passion, feel that that's a bad thing, that that's a good thing, that that's fun, it makes you smile. We also want to get your attention. We want to make you look at that thing because we got to have a scene. And we want to draw your attention to this because something might be about to happen. So, if I were to say the broad term of animation, not in the term of apps, software, technology, anything like that, just in the world, what comes to mind? Companies, techniques, films. Disney. Disney is an animation company. Been around for a long, long time. Made a lot of animations. So I want to talk about Fantasia a little bit. Has everybody seen Fantasia? It's awesome. It's an awesome, awesome movie. We're looking at a broomstick carrying buckets of water. I think we're all pretty familiar, unless you have a Roomba or something, that a broomstick is an inanimate object that just sits there, doesn't do anything. But in Fantasia, the broomstick becomes alive. It does things. Particularly here, this broomstick is alive. It's got emotion. It's fun. It's cool. Mickey interacts with it, and it makes us laugh. But then later on throughout this part, the broomsticks get terrifying. But what's kind of interesting is that, notice that between these two frames, it's still a broomstick. And these stills don't do it justice. You have to actually watch the movie to see why they get terrifying. But animation is what makes that broomstick terrifying. It's what makes it scary, especially as a kid. Maybe not necessarily as an adult, but especially as a kid, seeing these broomsticks trample over Mickey is like the worst. And they don't change the state of the stick. They just change the way it acts and what it does. So we're going to talk a little bit about a piece of work that Disney's put out called The Illusion of Life. I don't remember when they actually put this out, but it was built by Frank Thomas, famous for the Lady and the Tramp spaghetti scene. That's what he helped animate. He was an animation director. He was part of what Disney called the 9 Old Men. There was like the first 9 animators of Disney. And then Ollie Johnston was an animation director for Pinocchio. It's kind of his claim to fame. And these guys lived at Disney. I mean, I think Ollie died in late 90s, and he was like the last one, and he died working at Disney. I think his last Disney film came out in like 93 or something. Just crazy. These guys were animation professionals, and they were dealing with pencils and paper. So The Illusion of Life has 12 principles. And these 12 principles kind of dictate why and how you should use an animation. So the very first one, squash and stretch. It gives an object weight and flexibility. The volume of the object doesn't change. So you can see how it squishes and it flattens out, it gets bigger and it stretches out. Volume is consistent. And one thing I want to point out, we're going to be looking at a couple of these. I think these examples are amazing because this is a gray square 3D cube. But you can infer something about the character of a gray cube. So I think that's something really, really neat to pay attention to as we kind of walk through all these things. The next one is anticipation. Preparing the audience for an action. The best analogy to this is that if you think about a dancer, the dancer has to bend their knees before they make an action. A golfer's got a backswing before they can hit the ball. If you want to instill a sense of surprise to your user, you get rid of this anticipation. You just completely omit it. And it comes out of nowhere. Next one's staging. Directing an audience's attention, presentation of any idea so that it is completely and unmistakably clear. I think this one is extremely relatable to software. You know, if you're thinking about an interface where you've got a bunch of data and controls on the screen, and you need to draw the user's attention to something, how do you do that? You can do it with color, you can do it with layout, you can do it with weights, but you can also do it with animation. I mean, the box is not moving here. We're just kind of drawing your eye to it with this animation. Imagine there's all sorts of stuff around it. You're going to be looking at this box after that thing kind of pops out. Straight ahead, pose to pose. This isn't as relatable to software. I think it's still important. Straight ahead is when you're doing an animation that goes frame by frame. So you're starting at time 0. You draw something, you go to time 0.1, you draw another thing, so on and so forth until your animation is done. What I think is most important is pose to pose. We're talking about keyframes. Have you guys heard the word keyframes before? I know it's pretty common in CSS. Happens a lot in iOS. You know, you're basically saying, I've got this state, I've got this state, and I've got a time in between, and then the system can, you know, interoperate on the graphics card, on the runtime, whatever the display link thing is, and say, you know, we've gone this far, the object should be in this position, or it should have this state, this layout, whatever it is. So pose to pose is pretty much how all software development animation is done. You've got follow through. So this gives an object exaggeration. I think this is really interesting. Notice the base of the object's not actually moving past its A to B, but the rest of the object's kind of following through with it. It gives some fun, some excitement to the object. Slow in, slow out. So who has heard of easing? That's also a pretty common term. Pretty simple. You start slow, you pick up your pace, and you slow down again. Arcs. This one's a little bit more common, but this is incredibly important. I don't know if you guys follow the Apple world. When they came out with iOS 7, they came out with these new icon layouts, and they're like showing this big grid of circles and circles inside of circles and all these lines and stuff. But the idea was that the entire design followed an arc, followed a pattern. The same thing is true of animations. If you're moving from A to B, it should be on some sort of circular pattern. And I'm not even saying necessarily like this. This is literally on a circular pattern. But if you're moving from A to B, that timing function should probably be circular. Secondary action. This one's pretty cool. Sort of common in software. This is getting into a little bit more of physics. So the idea is that the secondary animation of that little tiny box is reinforcing the animation of the big box. I don't think I've ever done this in interfaces, but cool nonetheless. And timing, talking about easing again. You notice if you watch it, the top box and the bottom box, the time is exactly the same. Timing functions are different. It gives an entirely different feel and animation. The top one looks like it's just kind of sliding on ice. The bottom one looks like it's like a big block of Jell-O. An exaggeration. The example on this is maybe a little bit silly. That's probably over-the-top exaggeration, but you get the idea of, this little tiny box that grows in size. It's got these jaws that come out and they expand past and they chomp. It's all exaggerated, but it gives a sense of fun. It's exciting. It's different. Definitely important. Solid drawings. Giving something weight. This is more 3D space. And I think when we're talking about software and interfaces, it's more important to think about just space. It's not necessarily like we're making 3D interfaces. I think that might be a little silly. But when you're designing stuff, when you're giving things shadows, when you're giving things dimension, this is always something that you need to consider. And appeal. When we talked about vibrancy and charisma, this is important. Objects, interfaces, images, they can have appeal. Things can be, I like to say, like the Facebook app, the Facebook paper app is delightful. It's fun to use. When you're talking about animation, you can use animation to make things look like heroes. You can also use animation to make things look like monsters, and they're evil. Think about the hero being a profile page, or the like button, and the monster being the delete modal. They've got negative connotations. All right, I have a little video that kind of summarizes all of those 12 things. This is made by Disney, I believe. You hear it? All right.
The following has been paraphrased from The Illusion of Life by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston. Squash and stretch. This action gives the illusion of weight and volume to a character as it moves. Anticipation. Prepares the audience for a major action the character is about to perform. Each major action is preceded with specific moves that anticipate for the audience what is about to happen. Staging. It's the presentation of an idea so that it is clear. Straight ahead and pose to pose. Pose to pose is charted with key drawings done at intervals throughout the scene. Straight ahead animation starts at the first drawing and works drawing to the end of a scene. Follow through and overlap. When the main body of the character stops, all other parts continue to catch up to the main mass. Nothing stops all at once. Slow in and slow out. As the action starts, we have more drawings near the starting pose, one or two in the middle, and more drawings near the next pose. Fewer drawings make the action faster, and more drawings make the action slower. Arcs. All actions, with few exceptions, follow an arc or slightly circular path. Arcs give animation a more natural action and better flow. Secondary action. It's an additional action in the scene used as a supplement of the main one in order to reinforce it and add more dimension. Timing. More drawings between poses slow and smooth the action. Fewer drawings make the action faster and crisper. Timing maintains the appearance of an object abiding by the laws of physics. Exaggeration. Remain true to reality, just presenting it in a wild or more extreme form. Solid drawings. It means taking into account forms in three-dimensional space, giving them volume and weight. Appeal. It's a quality of charm, able to please the viewer's eyes. It's the charisma of the action.
Cool. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, comments on the whole 12 principles of animation before we get into more like software interface stuff?
I think it's interesting that those 12 principles have been stuck with animators for a while, and now we're starting to see those same principles going into our native applications. Things that we saw in the past are now applied to things that we can actually interact with, to bring interaction with those animation principles.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the movie Bambi. On the surface, there is like very little correlation with Facebook paper or Instagram or all of Google's material design stuff. But in reality, I mean, it is all the same. It's communication. You've got a medium that's an art form that is a movie. It's an animated movie. You have a medium that is an application. They both serve purposes, and they can both use animation to drive a point. There we go. All right, timing functions. So I mentioned this a couple times. There were 2 steps, I think, that kind of hinted towards timing functions. I think this is super interesting. Notice that they both hit their apex and they both hit the bottom at the exact same time. But I mean, this is kind of a silly question. What looks better? Yeah. I mean, it's hard to quantify why it looks better, but it looks more natural. I mean, that's the bottom line. Because if I were to take a tennis ball and I were to throw it up in the air, it's going to slow down before it hits its apex. It's going to speed up, and that's going to hit my hand. So when we talk timing functions, it's exactly what this is. There's a delta of position, and I want to mention that I don't want to get hung up on position, because usually when we think animation, we're thinking position. You can animate other stuff. You can animate colors for something. Something I've been playing around with recently is you can animate audio. You can animate the level, so the volume of audio. You could have something go from 0 to full audio and do a spring animation and give sort of an effect, kind of subtle, but you can animate that. And when we look at these ball examples, we've got on the left is a linear animation, something that's going from 0 to 0.5 in steps, so 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. But on the right, we're using a different timing function, something that's more exponential to look more natural. So when we talk timing functions, I don't want to get into math too much because math is boring. On the left, we've got the ball's vertical movement. On the bottom, we've got time. It's just position over time. So when we take a look at that bouncy ball, we just see that at the beginning it moves just a little bit, then it moves a little bit more, and then it's picking up velocity, and the position changes more and more and more. That's all it is. Very, very simple. Here's the interesting thing with timing functions. There's a lot of them. You've got very linear, you've got easing, you've got ease in, you've got ease out. What's some of the crazy ones? Ease in, bounce, ease in, out, elastic, ease in, out, bounce. There's a lot of different ways that you can do easing. And then here's a little bit of Objective-C. I promise it's not going to be in here, but don't even worry about it. We're not going to step through it. You can write your own timing functions. You can say that given time t, here's where the position of some object's supposed to be. So this is a question for you guys. What is an interface when we're talking about software? Okay. Is there any more to an interface?
I guess just how a person interacts with a given tool.
Yeah.
So that doesn't have to be a physical thing. It could be a spatial thing,
Yep.
oral thing.
It's the communication process between the user and the application.
Right. Right. And I mean, you have the most basic forms of data as well. You're showing text, you're showing images, simplistic data, you've got controls, all sorts of stuff. So, why do we have user interface design? Why do we have user experience design? Why do we animate this stuff?
Make it easier to use for users.
Yep.
More engaging.
Yeah. I mean, when I gave the example of the Fantasia broom, that broom didn't have an eyes and mouth to make you think that, oh, it's good, it's smiling, it's a happy broom, it's a good broom. Oh, it's got fangs, it's a bad broom. They used motion to do that. I mean, when is the last login screen that you designed or saw that had eyes and a mouth? There may be some out there. There's some weird login stuff. So this is my Bible. It is the Apple Human Interface Guidelines. Beautiful, subtle animation pervades the iOS UI, makes the app experience more engaging and dynamic. Appropriate animation can communicate status and provide feedback, enhance the sense of direct manipulation, help people visualize the results of their actions. And that is super, super important. The last bullet I would throw in here would be about emotion. Apple is more driven about utility and productivity. I think that I would toss on here a fourth bullet that says animation is supposed to make your user emotional about the application they're using. It's supposed to make them happy. It's supposed to make them sad. Maybe it's dull and boring. Maybe the interface is supposed to be super, super boring. So, Instagram. What sort of emotions, if you use Instagram, even if you don't, you've probably heard of it, what sort of emotions do you think that Instagram, the app, not necessarily this interface, but the app elicits?
Toggle.
What's that?
Toggling.
Yep. So Instagram is a very social app. It's very fun. There's a reason that the like button is a heart. It's supposed to be neat. It's supposed to be cool. It's supposed to make you happy. Instagram is an appropriate application to add animations to. And not just any animation. I wouldn't want to, I wouldn't want to tap that little disclosure indicator here and get like some explosion animation. I want to get something bouncy. I want to get something cool. It's supposed to make me smile. What about this one? Pretty sweet. What do you feel? I mean, what do you feel when you look at that interface?
Static.
Mm-hmm. Bored. I mean, it's totally true. It looks like a mistake. So it's totally true. I mean, I look at this and I'm stoic. I don't care. And that's probably because I am not in whatever field or I'm not in whatever profession that this graph is supposed to be projecting. But if I was, I'm probably not looking at that and thinking like, oh, super duper happy thoughts, like I'm in some fun land. And more importantly, I think this is super, super important, is that if you animate those bar lines and they're sitting there and bouncing, when I am some landscaper and I need to know the distance to some certain point, and that freaking graph is just sitting there and bouncing around the line that I need, and it's not telling me what that exact value is, I'm going to delete your app. So how do I animate my app? And I'm saying app, but anything, software. How do I animate my software? So we've got transitional animations. And when I say transitional animations, I'm not talking about touching something that sits there and wiggles. I'm not talking about trying to get the user's attention. I'm talking about I click on a link and I'm going to go to a new page. Or I tap on some item in a list and I'm going to get the detail view pushed on top. How do I get from A to B? This is what the web is, for the most part. I don't want to generalize the web. There are some people doing awesome, awesome stuff with animations on the web, but traditionally, you click on a hyperlink, request goes out to the server craps out some new HTML, and you get a new page rendered. And it's this rough transition. Just boom, new item. There you go. Have fun. What about this? More interesting? Hey, I'm not getting into the technical aspects of this. We can go on about that forever. But so compare this with the last one. What do you guys, what's your initial reaction between the two?
It's not startling.
Yeah, startling, I think, is really good. I hadn't thought about that word, but that's perfect. It's not abrupt.
Not sure what the relationships are before and after.
That's an excellent, excellent point. And that's what animations ultimately are there to serve, is to be a communication tool to say, here's this new thing, here's how you got from A to B. Now here's a different take on this animation. I think this is interesting. You look at the one that just pops up and it flies in front of your face. Now you're adding this one. Do you guys have any initial reactions to what this says differently from the last one?
Different characteristic.
Expand on that. Different how?
One came in as a scale, had a little bounce, made it more fun. The other one has more of a solid structure, more I would guess maybe more demanding. What it was more fun.
Yeah, I agree. Anybody else?
It drives the two drive a different implication. The first one said to me, "Hey, I was always here, but I wasn't being represented." It popped in from an existing category. This says to me, "I'm a completely new thing that has been added here, either as part of a category above or below it. I've been blanked, I've been added by you, or chosen in some way." So it provides a feedback for your action. Very different things. I look at I'm talking about the thing for the listening thing. I see left-hand navigation there.
Yeah,
it's all empty. That's what I'm seeing.
And I think that is perfect, because what this animation is doing is it's introducing a sense of direction. It's saying I'm coming from, kind of literally out of left field and flying into your interface. When previously it's, hey, I was always kind of part of this, now I'm joining. It's the most subtle sort of thing, but it absolutely does affect how your user perceives your interface. So along those lines, there's this notion of maintaining context in your application. So taking a quick look at, this is a World Cup app that I made that I was just playing around with. That animation tool that I was talking about that is in Facebook Paper, I pulled into this. So when I'm talking about maintaining context, it's kind of hard to see. This GIF's kind of crappy. But whenever you're tapping on a game, a match, sorry, the flags animate up, stuff comes in from the bottom, it blurs, but it doesn't feel different. You know that you're maintaining the context of where you are, where you were, what you're looking at. You know that I tapped on this list item, and those flags are jumping up on top here. I'm still within the Matches app. So if you guys haven't had a chance to check out the material design stuff that came out of Google I/O, you absolutely should. I am the biggest Apple fanboy, and I think that what Google is doing with material design is amazing. So they are putting a lot of thought and effort into what it means to transition between interfaces. This is just a very simple transition. Do I have to hit it twice to make it? Oh, sorry, this one's a video. Very simple transition, but you absolutely do not lose context about where you are or what you're doing. This is another one. They've got a really wonderful section on do's and don'ts animations. So they have animations that you shouldn't do and how you could make them better. So here's the don't. And I'll preface this that I think this animation is fine. I would not criticize an app that does it. So I'm going to some empty state and I'm going to a state that's got a bunch of stuff in it. Now here's, oops, let me look at it again. That's fine. Here's their do. Now I want you guys to watch this. I'm gonna ask you like what you feel, like what you feel is different. Sorry if this is kind of like psychology thing, but I really think it's interesting. I mean, what's like gut instinct reaction?
Since the first one happened all at once, it's too much for the user to take in. The other one, about the same time, they happen one at a time, which leads the user down a path that leads to. I can see the way it's happening.
Yeah. Yep. So think about like if go back to this don't. Imagine all these squares are images. And they're images and they're sorted by time. Yeah, you can throw them all up there, that's fine. But if you do this and you sort them by time, haven't you instantly communicated to your user that the one that's in the upper left corner is newer than the one in the bottom right corner? Maybe. So continuity between states. Another great Google I/O example. This is a don't. Hopefully this one's kind of obvious. Like what the hell just happened? I mean, it exploded, right? There's something in the middle of your interface detonated and just shoved everything else off the interface. Yeah. What about this one? A big gray area. You know, that could be, we could be looking at a profile image. These are all profile images. I tap on one, it tosses it up there. And I'm pulling in status updates or friends or anything that these little yellow boxes are. It just kind of makes more sense. So when I'm talking about transition design, this guy, what I'm about to show you, this is an iOS developer. And this guy just hacks on stuff. And he makes some of the most freaking unbelievable interfaces, I think, ever. I don't know if there's sound. Now, there's pros and cons to this. Might be overkill. But if the goal of this application is to be fun and to be neat, I think it's like complete home run. Hey, look. Ah. They're so sweet. I've been tweeting this guy to open source this stuff, and he won't. Ironically, I think it's a little bit Windows 80. Yeah. Oh. Here's another one he did. So I figured out how this guy did that one. So I've at least got that on them. That sort of curtain-y stuff. But that's, I mean, that is like amazing. And to have the mind to do that, I think, is awesome. And more importantly, if you have something in your mind, how do you actually do it? So this might be kind of off-putting, but I think absolutely the best way to get something out there is to just freaking draw it. And we're talking animations. You're not animating. You're not doing like the way the animations that Disney did. You're not drawing a bunch of different frames. I'm saying draw your from state and your to state, and maybe actually pull up Microsoft Word or Sublime Text and write some sentences about what the user's supposed to be feeling when they do these actions, maybe what you're thinking when these actions happen. I think that this is it. I'm going to walk through a couple other prototyping tools, but easily I think this is the best because it actually makes you think about what you're trying to do. But if you just want to jump into making stuff bounce around, Quartz Composer is a developer tool that was built by Apple. It's not included with Xcode. You have to go to their developer portal and download it. There might be some copies floating around there on the internet. Really, really cool tool. I mean, you can get really, really fine-grained control of animations, but it is crazy difficult to use. This is the interface. Yeah, it sucks. It really sucks. Each of these little boxes has stuff like string strength, initial velocity, dampening effect, X position, Y position, mouse down, mouse Y. And you have to, it's kind of neat because it's like visual programming. You click on this little nub and you drag it over to here, which maybe this is an image. I'm totally blanking on what those things are called. Ah, thank you. But you wire all this stuff up, and some of these things you can actually double-click into this, and it's got another like nested board. It gets crazy out of control. But if you know what you're doing, this is amazing. The Facebook Paper guys prototyped the Paper app. The guy who prototyped it, his name is Mike Mattis. He's the one that did the Nest. Really amazing designer. And he prototyped the entire app in Quartz Composer using Facebook's open source tool called Origami. And you can find this online, download it. It's basically an extension of Quartz Composer. Simplifies some of like string or spring stuff, spring and struts. Still, it's still got a pretty steep learning curve. This makes it a little bit easier though. If you want to say from this image to this image, and when the user does this, drags the mouse, it's got this spring effect.
So what do each of those boxes represent in that UI? Just trying to figure out what
yeah. So in this one, actually, I wish I wiped my computer and I don't have Quartz Composer installed anymore. Otherwise, we could dig into this. But this is basically an interface element. So this could be an image. Typically, this is an image. This is an interaction. The purple ones are interactions. This could be mouse clicks, keyboard interactions, whatever. Usually mouse clicks. These are effects. If you've ever done, I'm going to totally blank on it. There's a music and sound processing software that is very, very similar.
Reason?
What's it?
Reason?
I'm not sure.
It's like an audio jacks and.
Yeah. I mean, this is the same thing. If you were to think about having like a MIDI and an amplifier and all sorts of stuff with cables plugged into different things, this is exactly the same sort of interface. I would say that like I'm going to drag the XY position of my profile image, and whenever I click on it, I'll take the X position of my mouse. I'm going to apply a spring effect to it that's going to dampen it. So I'm going to drag something, and it's going to kind of give some resistance. And then the output is another image, something else. That's kind of how you wire things up. I've messed around with it. I find it incredibly cumbersome. I've not even used origami before. I've heard good things. I like Facebook's open source work. The tool that I like to use is Keynote. It's Apple's software. You can do transitions to, from. You can get kind of crazy with your transitions. You can do keyframes in Keynote, and you can do click events. You can't do drag events, but you can do click things. I click on this image, this button, and some stuff happens, and I'm at this new interface. Keynote's pretty good at it. You could also just get into some code. This is a tool called Framer.js. It's a JavaScript tool. I think it's $50. It might have some free trial stuff. But you can do, oh, I thought this was supposed to animate. Guess not. But you can make animations on the left there in very, very simple JavaScript and see them here on the right. I typically skip all of this stuff and I go straight to code because that's what makes sense to me. But other people have different preferences. Use the tool that is better for you. I honestly think that for anybody, pen and paper and writing sentences about what your animations are supposed to do and feel like are the best. So kind of near the end, one of the side effects of animations that I think is really, really interesting, animations take time. You want to move from this screen to this screen, and you want to have some bouncy stuff all over it, and it's going to take 0.4 seconds. That's 0.4 seconds that you can do something. Web requests take time. Processing data in the background takes time. You can offload some work while somebody's waiting for this animation to finish. Instagram is notorious for this, using it all throughout the app. You'll touch the like button, and it's called optimistic design. So the like button will change to a like state before the servers responded and said, like, oh yeah, I stored that, that was okay. If the server responds and says, no, it didn't work, they'll change the button from like state to unlike state or deselected state. So if you're moving, you tap on a profile image and you're pushing a profile detail view onto the screen, whatever that is, iOS, Android, web, you've got however long that animation takes to load that profile. So you can do some cool, fancy animation, and then once it's done, boom, there's all that profile information. And the intrinsic value is that it feels faster. It's not. It's absolutely not. You're cheating the user, but it just feels faster. So if you can combine cheating and feeling faster with making the user happy with a bunch of bouncy crap, it's cool. Finally, this last little bit I think is really interesting. So these guys did a study with some Facebook stuff. I think it was actually Facebook that did the study. It's maybe testing with their apps. And a while ago, when you first launched the app, you would have some sort of dialogue while it tries to update. So on the left, you've got this custom loader animation, and on the right, you've got the iOS system animation. This is what the system animation looks like. Pretty familiar. Even if you're an Android user, you've probably seen system animations. When they pushed out this A/B test and they polled their users and they said, all right, your app was slow. Why? What are you upset about? When users had this spinner, they were like, man, my phone sucks. Verizon sucks. They just take forever. When they use this loader, Facebook sucks. They blame Facebook for being slow. Technically, absolutely no difference. Just the difference of using a new animation shifted the blame entirely. It was fascinating. Oh, geez. That's my to-do slide. So In summary, we've talked a lot about what animations are, how you should use them, more importantly, what they do. I mean, they're a communication medium to your users. And we talked a lot about interfaces and how they should work with interfaces and what responsible use of animation is. And then finally, what else can you do? You can do work in the background and use system loaders a lot because it makes you look better. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this. I'm hanging out here for the next hour, so please ask questions. But I really, really appreciate you guys coming to watch, and Kevin and Adam for putting this on. This has been a lot of fun. So, and also, if you have comments, if you thought something was really stupid or boring, please let me know, because I'm going to do this presentation again. So, thank you.
Just turn on lights, watch your eyes. It's really dark in your phone.
So, questions? I mean,
So, going to pencil and paper using keynotes versus other applications.
Mhm.
I think everyone uses their own tool based upon their own preference. What makes you lean towards that method more than others?
So I think the most important thing if you're looking at prototyping or trying to explore how to come up with an animation is what you want your end goal to be. If you're just trying to find what animation looks neat, you use some open source stuff, maybe poke around, dribble, look at some GIFs or something. If you're trying to tweak your animation, maybe you've already got a spring in there and you just want to see how springy it should be. Tweak with some code. If you are looking to, if you've got interfaces already built and you want to figure out how to get from A to B and what's most appropriate, that's where I lean towards things like Keynote or Quartz Composer, where I can have a before state and an after state, and I can cut stuff out and add springs and timing stuff. That's typically what I do.
And being unfamiliar with the animation of creating prototypes with Keynote, what are some strengths that I can see off the bat that allows someone to get a prototype quicker?
Strengths?
Yeah.
So with Keynote, it's that there's absolutely no code. It's all drag and drop. It's a nice, simple, user-friendly GUI interface. And there's no startup, there's no setup. You just have Keynote, you add a slide, and then you just start dragging stuff around and adding animations. It's really, really simple. Yeah. Does that answer that? Okay. Yeah.
Have you or anybody in here, have you guys used Adobe Edge for animations?
I have not.
What was that experience like?
With Adobe Edge, they're kind of a competitor with the Flash interface. Flash interface called Swift.
Like 15 years ago, we probably would have had the same conversation.
And so it was so that's kind of the way of how animate on canvas. So you do have keyframes, you do have easing and whatnot. So it's kind of like you have layers. So it's kind of a similar interface. So if you're familiar with the Flash interface, you want to go back into the whole create animations for canvas. That's a great thing to do. In the same way as that, also if you want to create prototypes of the mobile as well, as that can also interpret mobile as well.
Do you like using it then? Were you action script before?
A little bit, yeah. I haven't really animated with too much with Edge, but I have to with the interface and I what I think I do.
Emails?
So let's say if you're good with the whole prototyping tools, you can do whatever you want with those.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get to the whole coding thing. You're like, I'm going to say I'm a coder. I can get stuff on GitHub and go down that rabbit hole and just cut and paste. But if you were to try and do it yourself, how do you go about that?
It's a really good question, especially if. So here's an interesting situation: is you've got a designer that is really good with animation prototyping tools, and you want to give that to like a development team, and it's like, all right, I've perfected this, I've tweaked it, all the like timing stuff is perfect, now build that. There's no easy answer. It's definitely hard. Probably the best thing to do would be to piece apart the animation and to communicate it however is most appropriate. And by that I mean, is it keyframe based? Is it physics based? The Facebook animation library that I mentioned is all physics based. You don't actually give anything duration. You give it distance. You give it a from state and a to state and like some characteristics for the spring, and it can figure that out. So if that's how you're prototyping stuff, I would suggest giving that to somebody and saying, I've created a spring. Here's our physics properties. And maybe leave it up to them to either figure out the keyframe mathematics of what that needs to be, or there's some like physics library like Box2D or something where they can figure that out. I think that's probably the most important part is this is time and position based, or this is physics based, and here are those properties. Other than that, it's kind of trial and error. Yeah.
As a designer, how do you decide what is the limit of the things you animate? I mean, it's so easy to get caught up in all this fancy stuff that's happening. You want to animate that.
Yeah.
What is the limit on a page? Not page, yeah.
Yeah.
How many items would
So I try to not animate until I need to. So I lean more on the side of very static, boring-looking pages, and when I need to get your attention or I need to make you feel something, that's when I'll introduce an animation. I think if you start with, hey, we're going to go from A to B and we're going to animate it, that's backwards, because you'll just end up with an animation, and there's not really a point. You haven't really decided what the idea is between getting to that new page or that new screen. I really think it starts with what you're trying to do, and that's why I say pen and paper is best, because if you can write out, I'm going to show them a picture and they're going to touch on that profile, and man, they're just going to, I want to put a big old smile on their face. Then explore animations, because you're trying to do something delightful instead of, oh yeah, we're going to make this pop up here and this is going to spring up here, because then you'll just end up with a bunch of animations, and you get into that situation. I've been there where you're just like, I just animated everything, and it's all like I tap this button and it's just everything is springing around and it's out of sync and it looks just horrible. And that's just because if you go at it from we should animate first, you end up with kind of random stuff that doesn't have any meaning. Anybody else?
What's your main resource for like open source stuff? Do you have a specific site where you can easily find like the best practices in animation?
Absolutely. So if we're weird, it's me. If we're talking animation inspiration, I will give you guys a website. It is CAPP, so captivate.co. I'm going to open this page, and this is basically animated design inspiration for interfaces. So we're looking at, what is this one? Elevate. You can hover over this, and we're looking at some sort of animation transition. You can go in here in patterns, transitions, tracking, pull to refresh, loading, intro, whatever. I'm not sure who curates this list, but they do a really good job. Let's see this one. And there are just pages and pages and pages of this. So if I'm ever like, man, I really want to show like a profile in animation, and I'm out of ideas, I will instantly go to this site. This is very iOS specific. If you're looking at Android stuff, the new Google Material Design, the whole site is just loaded with stuff. I think I was talking about earlier, they open source their Google I/O app, which is runs on Android L, and it's got all of these material design animations built into it. It's really, really sweet. I would check that out for some technical how-to, as well as some like real-world how-to. I will also frequent just Dribble. I use this dribbleboard.com because they actually, it's just like a big endless scroll thing of Dribble stuff. And I'm on this site probably 2 or 3 times a day, and I'll just save. I can actually show you guys. So whenever I'm trying to just save some ideas about some open source stuff, just keep this folder of open source challenges, like things like, oh, I want to build that, or I want to build that. So I hold on to this stuff because whenever I see a cool animation, it's just neat to catalog it. Oh, yeah, this one's crazy. And again, animations can go too far. This one might be a little bit overkill, but it's cool.
How'd you figure out the bird animation?
So that is I could probably spend like an hour talking about that one. That's what's called a mesh transform. So every view that you look at on iOS is misleading because it looks like it's all 2D. It's not. It's 3D. It's OpenGL. And every view that you look at is laid out on a plane, and you can dissect that plane into subsections, I guess you would call it, and you can manipulate the XYZ position of those subsections and end up, if you dissect something into, where is that one? You dissect something into like thousands of points, you can actually crush something. It's really cool. But yeah, I could spend forever talking about that one. Anybody else?
So, do you ever sell this animations or are they add-ons? You know, like dealing with the client, do you sell the?
That's a good question. I have never sold an animation, but I should.
Is it protected?
I don't know how to answer that one. I bet that there are animations that have IP. I've never dealt with that before. And any of the animation stuff that I've done, I've either open sourced or put into an app that a client has paid me to do. And it's been very cut and dry for me. But that's an excellent point. I think that there could be an argument made for a design cushion to do animations. You know, we could make you a very flat, simple app where you tap this button, it goes to this view, or you click this link and it loads this page, or get into this stuff and make your app more enjoyable to use. I've never explored that before, but I absolutely think that the case could be made. When there's a value. If making your users happy is valuable somehow, then yeah. Cool. Seriously, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you coming out here. I'm going to be hanging out a little bit longer.